What if the reason you can't focus isn't because you're distracted, but because you're trying too hard? We've been taught that concentration is a muscle you strengthen through effort, through discipline, through sheer force of will. But the ancient Japanese warriors knew something different. They knew that absolute focus doesn't come from fighting the mind. It comes from dissolving the one who fights. They called it Mushin, the state of no mind, not emptiness, but presence so complete that the thinker disappears and only action remains. You've felt glimpses of it before, those rare moments when you stop trying and everything just flows, when the self-criticism vanishes, when performance anxiety dissolves, when you're so immersed in the moment that time itself seems to bend. That's not luck, that's not talent, that's Mushin breaking through the noise. And the reason you can't sustain it isn't because you're broken. It's because no one taught you that the path to focus requires letting go of the very thing you think controls it. You. This isn't another productivity hack. This isn't about optimizing your calendar or downloading the right app. This is about understanding why Eastern philosophy and modern psychology both point to the same uncomfortable truth. Suffering and awakening live in the same breath. Emotional pain isn't the obstacle to clarity, it's the doorway. And on the other side of that doorway is a way of being that doesn't require constant effort, constant monitoring, constant proof that you're good enough. What if the chaos in your mind isn't something to fix, but something to finally stop fighting? What if the focus you've been chasing has been waiting here all along, in the one place you forgot to look? The present moment, stripped of the performer pretending to live it. And it's about this that this video speaks. There's a particular kind of suffering that doesn't announce itself with sirens or screams. It hides in the gap between what's happening and what you think should be happening. Ethan felt it every time he opened his laptop. That mental effort, that tension in his jaw, that voice saying focus, 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 while his attention scattered like frightened birds. Eastern philosophy calls this the grasping mind, the part of us that believes we can wrestle reality into submission through sheer willpower. But here's what nobody tells you. The harder you grip the moment, the faster it dissolves. Control isn't focus. It's the fear of what happens when you let go. And that fear, it fragments everything it touches. Watch a child learning to ride a bike, and you'll see it clearly. The moment they stop thinking about balance, they find it. The moment they try to control every wobble, they fall. Ethan's mind worked the same way, constantly adjusting, correcting, managing. He'd start sketching a concept and simultaneously wonder if it was good enough, if his style was evolving, if he was wasting time on the wrong direction. Three streams of thought battling for the same narrow channel of awareness. Psychology of pain teaches us that suffering multiplies when attention divides. You can't be fully present in a moment you're trying to control. It's like trying to see your reflection clearly while stirring the water. The image fractures, and you blame the mirror. This is where emotional pain becomes a teacher, though we rarely recognize the lesson in real time. Ethan's exhaustion wasn't from the work itself. It was from the constant surveillance of his own performance. Self-awareness twisted into self-monitoring. Every creative choice became a test he might fail. In Zen philosophy, they call this the mind that cuts reality into pieces. You're no longer experiencing the moment. You're dissecting it, judging it, trying to optimize it while it's still unfolding. The sword of thought keeps slicing, and what remains isn't clarity, it's fragments. You end up living inside a mental courtroom where every action needs justification before it's even complete. The body knows this violence before the mind admits it. Ethan's shoulders stayed locked, his breath shallow, his stomach tight, all symptoms of a nervous system that never gets to rest. Mind-body connection isn't some abstract concept. It's the war you feel in your chest when your thoughts won't stop attacking the present. When you try to control the moment, your body treats every experience like a threat that needs managing. The ancient practice of mindfulness wasn't created to make people more productive. It was designed to end this internal war, to recognize that the enemy isn't distraction. It's the one who keeps demanding perfection from an imperfect, unfolding now. But here's the paradox Ethan couldn't yet see. The very act of trying to fix his focus was what kept breaking it. Mental effort becomes mental interference. You can't force presence the way you force a deadline. Yet we've built entire lives around this delusion that if we just try harder, think smarter, optimize better, we'll finally achieve that mythical state of perfect concentration. Meanwhile, the present moment keeps arriving exactly as it is, indifferent to our demands. And somewhere beneath all that striving, beneath the need to perform and the fear of failing, something whispers a question we're terrified to hear. What if the chaos isn't the problem? What if it's the one trying to control it? Ethan discovered something strange about his mind. It never truly rested, even when he told it to. He'd sit for meditation, timer set, posture perfect, breath counted, and within 30 seconds, his thoughts would hijack the silence. Did I lock the front door? That client email needs a response. Why does my back hurt? Am I meditating wrong? The irony wasn't lost on him. He was thinking about not thinking, planning his way into presence, strategizing spontaneity. Buddhism calls this the monkey mind, but that phrase makes it sound cute, manageable. What Ethan experienced felt more like a swarm, relentless, buzzing, exhausting. The noise wasn't just distraction. It was his mind's desperate attempt to solve a problem that only existed because it kept solving. Here's what most people miss about overthinking. It's not clarity in motion. It's disguised fear, looking for control. When the mind can't handle uncertainty, it creates the illusion of progress through analysis. Ethan would spend hours thinking through a design problem, convinced he was working, when really he was avoiding the vulnerability of just starting. Taoism teaches that true concentration begins when thought ends, but we've been conditioned to believe the opposite, that more thinking equals more understanding. So we loop. We rehearse conversations that haven't happened, review mistakes that can't be changed, plan futures that don't exist. And we call this being thoughtful when it's actually spiritual distraction dressed in productivity's clothing. The mind loves to trick us into believing its noise is necessary. If I stop thinking, I'll miss something important. If I stop planning, I'll fail. If I stop analyzing, I'll make mistakes. Ethan held these beliefs like sacred truths, never questioning them until exhaustion forced his hand. Shadow work reveals that what we call overthinking is often the ego's refusal to surrender. The self that tries, the one convinced it's in charge, can't tolerate the idea that clarity might arrive through stillness rather than effort. So it keeps generating thought, creating problems to solve, maintaining its relevance. It's like a radio that won't turn off, playing static and calling it music. There's a Zen story about a student who asks his master, "How do I stop my thoughts?" The master replies, "Who is the one trying to stop them?" This isn't a riddle. It's pointing to the trap Ethan lived inside. He wasn't being distracted by thoughts. He was being distracted by his relationship with them. The constant commentary, the inner dialogue, the voice that narrates experience instead of experiencing it. That's not consciousness itself. That's the mind performing consciousness, like an actor who forgot they're on stage. Suffering and awakening often meet at this exact point. The moment you realize the observer and the observed are playing the same exhausting game. But recognizing the noise doesn't immediately silence it. And that's where the real work begins. Ethan started noticing how his thoughts would spiral from one creative decision into existential questions about his entire career. Should this logo be bolder? Became, am I even good at this? Became, what's the point of any of this? 3 thoughts, 3 seconds. Infinite distance from the present moment. The mind tries to solve what only silence understands. And beneath all that mental gymnastics, beneath the need to figure everything out before it unfolds, something quieter waits. Not an answer, but a question. What remains when the noise finally stops pretending to be you? There was a version of Ethan that only existed in other people's eyes. Polished, confident, creatively effortless. He curated it carefully. The right portfolio pieces, the perfectly timed Instagram posts of his process, the casual way he'd mention landing a new client. But alone in his studio at 2 a.m., staring at work that felt hollow no matter how good it looked, a different truth emerged. He wasn't creating anymore. He was performing creation. Every brushstroke, every color choice, every concept carried the invisible weight of an audience he couldn't stop imagining. The need to perform destroys naturalness, and Ethan was learning this the hard way. His work had become a plea for validation disguised as self-expression, and the exhaustion of maintaining that illusion was starting to crack his foundation. The ego doesn't announce itself with arrogance. Sometimes it whispers through perfectionism, through the fear of being ordinary, through the quiet terror of creating something that doesn't impress. Ethan's internal dialogue had shifted from "I want to make" to "what will make them think I'm talented." This is where ego dissolution becomes necessary, but terrifying. Because the self that tries, the one built on achievement, recognition, and external proof of worth, can't imagine existing without them. So it clings, it works harder, pushes longer, demands better results, convinced that the next success will finally silence the doubt. But psychology of pain reveals a cruel paradox. The more you perform for validation, the less validated you feel when it arrives. Eastern philosophy teaches that the self that tries is what prevents true flow. Wu Wei, effortless action, can't emerge when every move is calculated for effect. Ethan had read about this concept, even nodded along to podcast episodes about letting go of outcomes. But knowing something intellectually and releasing it emotionally are oceans apart. He'd finish a design he loved, post it online, then refresh his phone every 10 minutes, checking likes, comments, shares, quantifying his worth in real time. The work itself became secondary to its reception. And when the validation came, it felt empty. When it didn't, devastating. He was trapped in a cycle where results defined him, yet no result ever felt like enough. This is the hidden violence of living for performance. You stop being present in your own life. Every conversation becomes a chance to impress. Every project becomes a referendum on your value. Every silence feels like rejection. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he created something just because it moved him, without immediately wondering if it was good enough to share. The fear of failing blocks spontaneous action, and spontaneity is where genius actually lives. Not in the rehearsed, polished, perfected version, but in the raw, unguarded moment of making something because you must. Meditation and suffering intersect here. Sitting with the discomfort of being nobody, creating nothing, proving nothing, just breathing, just existing, just enough. But the ego fights this dissolution like it's fighting for survival, because in a way, it is. The identity Ethan built around being the talented one, the creative professional, the guy who's got it figured out, that construct needs constant reinforcement, or it collapses. And collapse feels like death when you've mistaken the mask for your face. So he kept performing, kept chasing results, kept measuring his existence against metrics that had nothing to do with what actually mattered. Until one evening, alone in his studio with a blank canvas and no deadline, no client, no audience, just him and the question he'd been avoiding. Who am I when no one's watching? And is that person enough? The turning point came on an ordinary Thursday, when Ethan's body simply refused to continue the charade. His hands shook over the keyboard, his chest felt compressed, his mind, that relentless engine of worry and performance, finally stalled. Not dramatically, not poetically, just stopped. He sat there, unable to work, unable to think his way forward, unable to do anything except breathe. And in that involuntary pause, something ancient whispered through the cracks of his exhaustion. What if the breath already knows what the mind keeps trying to learn? The Japanese called this state Mushin, no mind. But Ethan didn't know that yet. He only knew that for the first time in years, he wasn't trying to control anything. He was just here. There's an old practice, simple enough that most people dismiss it as too basic to be transformative. Fix your gaze on a single point, breathe until the body disappears from awareness, and let everything else fall away. Breath is the bridge between chaos and emptiness, not metaphorically, but mechanically. When attention narrows to the rhythm of inhale and exhale, the mind loses its footing. It can't narrate what it can't grasp. It can't perform when there's no audience. Ethan started with 5 minutes, sitting in his studio chair, eyes locked on a coffee stain on the wall, breathing like his life depended on it. Which, in a way, it did. The first 3 minutes were torture. Thoughts screaming for attention, body itching to move, ego demanding he do something productive. But then, silence. Not the absence of sound. The absence of the one who usually listened. This is where mindfulness stops being a trendy concept and becomes an actual practice that rewires suffering. Ethan discovered that single-pointed attention wasn't about forcing focus, it was about removing everything that fractured it. One breath, one point, one moment. No past to regret, no future to worry about, no performance to maintain. Buddhism teaches that suffering exists in the gap between reality and our resistance to it, and breath collapses that gap entirely. You can't argue with an inhale. You can't negotiate with an exhale. The body breathes whether the ego approves or not, and in that involuntary rhythm, there's a doorway most people never notice. Ethan walked through it accidentally, out of desperation, and found something on the other side that no amount of thinking had ever delivered: presence without effort. The technique itself is deceptively simple, which is why the mind dismisses it. Sit. Choose an object or a point. Could be a candle flame, a spot on the wall, even the sensation of breath at your nostrils. Let your gaze soften there. Breathe naturally, but notice each breath like you're meeting it for the first time. When thought arrives, and it will constantly at first, don't fight it. Just return. Point. Breath. Return. Point. Breath. Return. Bushido warriors use this before battle, not to hype themselves up, but to dissolve the self that could be afraid. Because absolute focus arises when the mind dissolves into rhythm. Ethan practiced this daily, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 30, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the grip of performance began to loosen. Here's what happened that nobody warned him about. The more present he became, the more he noticed how absent he'd been. Years of living inside his head, rehearsing, planning, performing, all of it suddenly felt like watching life through a window instead of living inside it. Inner stillness isn't peaceful at first. It's confronting. It shows you how much noise you've been calling normal, but it also shows you something else. That focus isn't something you achieve. It's what remains when you stop interfering. Ethan would sit, breathe, stare at that coffee stain, and feel his entire nervous system downshift from panic to nothing. Not emptiness like depression, emptiness like space, room to move, room to be. And in that space, a question began forming that had nothing to do with results or validation. What if I've been fighting the wrong battle all along? The mind lies, but the body never does. Ethan learned this the hard way, through months of his shoulders screaming what his thoughts refused to admit. He was carrying weight that didn't belong to him. Tension stored in his jaw from conversations he never had. Tightness in his chest from outcomes he couldn't control. His body had become a warehouse for unprocessed fear, and no amount of mental gymnastics could unlock it. Eastern philosophy has known this for millennia, that wisdom doesn't live in the head, but in the flesh, in the breath, in the involuntary truth of how we hold ourselves when nobody's watching. The mind-body connection isn't some wellness buzzword. It's the difference between knowing you're anxious and feeling where that anxiety actually lives. When Ethan finally stopped trying to think his way into presence and started listening to his body instead, everything shifted. He'd sit for his breath practice and notice his right shoulder creeping toward his ear, a physical manifestation of bracing for impact that had nothing to do with the present moment. He'd catch himself holding his breath during simple tasks, as if life required constant preparation for disaster. Trauma healing happens in the body first, the mind second, because the nervous system stores what consciousness forgets. You can't reason your way out of fight or flight when your body still believes it's under attack. So he learned to ask different questions. Not, what should I do? But, what is my body trying to tell me right now? Not, how do I fix this? But, where am I holding tension that doesn't serve me? There's a practice Ethan stumbled into that changed his relationship with now. Body scanning as anchor. Lying flat, eyes closed, moving attention slowly from feet to head. Not to relax, but to locate. Where does the fear live? Where does the performance anxiety store itself? Where does the need for control manifest physically? He found it everywhere. Clenched stomach, locked knees, shallow breath. His body was a map of all the wars his mind had been fighting. And suddenly he had a language for suffering that didn't require words. Detachment in Zen doesn't mean disconnection. It means observing without adding commentary. So he'd feel the tightness in his chest and just notice. Not fix, not understand. Just witness the body being honest about what the mind kept denying. This is where impermanence becomes lived experience rather than philosophical concept. Ethan would track tension through his body and watch it shift, dissolve, reappear somewhere else. Nothing permanent, nothing solid, just energy moving through form looking for release. The body exists only in now. It can't perform yesterday's breath or tomorrow's heartbeat. When attention drops from the thinking mind into physical sensation, time collapses. There's only this inhale, this pulse, this moment of contact between foot and floor. Non-attachment becomes easier when you realize how little the body cares about your narrative. It's not trying to be successful or impressive or good enough. It's just being. And that simple, relentless presence teaches what 1,000 self-help books couldn't. You already know how to be present. You've just been ignoring the teacher. But here's the edge most people avoid. Surrendering to the body's wisdom means admitting the mind doesn't have all the answers. For someone like Ethan, whose entire identity was built on thinking, planning, figuring things out, that's terrifying. It means trusting breath over thought, sensation over strategy, the involuntary truth of how you feel right now over the carefully constructed story of who you should be. He'd sit in his studio, hands resting on his knees, attention dropping into the raw physicality of existing, and feel something underneath all the performance anxiety, aliveness, not the curated Instagram-worthy version. Just the messy, breathing, imperfect fact of being here. And slowly, quietly, a new question emerged from that grounded presence. What if the master I've been searching for was never in my head at all? There came a morning when Ethan sat down to design and something different happened. Or rather, something stopped happening. He opened his software, positioned his hand on the tablet, and instead of the usual mental checklist, is this concept strong enough? Will the client approve? What if I'm not as good as I think? There was just movement. His hand created without asking permission. Colors appeared without debate. Forms emerged without the narrator explaining why. It wasn't flow in the romanticized sense. It was stranger, quieter. It felt like watching himself work from somewhere beyond judgment, beyond authorship. The Japanese have a word for this: Mushin, the state where there's no longer a doer, separate from the doing. Total presence acts on its own. This is what all the breath work, all the body awareness, all the sitting with discomfort had been pointing toward. Not better focus, but the dissolution of the one who tries to focus. Ego dissolution doesn't happen dramatically in most lives. It happens in small, unremarkable moments when you catch yourself living without commentary. Ethan would be mid-conversation and realize he hadn't been rehearsing his next sentence. He'd be walking and notice he wasn't planning the next 5 steps. Action became pure consciousness in motion, and the relief was staggering. Because the self that performs, that exhausting, vigilant, never-satisfied voice, had finally stepped aside. Not forever, not perfectly, but enough to glimpse what spiritual transformation actually meant. Not becoming someone better, but recognizing there was never really a someone to improve in the first place. The instant where there's no longer a doer sounds mystical until you experience it, and then it's just obvious. Like remembering something you'd always known but had been too distracted to notice. Ethan's creativity shifted from effortful to effortless. Not because he got better at his craft, but because he stopped standing in his own way. Wu Wei, action without forcing, can't be practiced. It can only be allowed. You can't try your way into effortless flow. You can only remove the obstacles, the need to control outcomes, the fear of judgment, the story that you're the one making it all happen. When those dissolve, what remains isn't emptiness. It's movement without resistance, thought without thinker, creation without creator. Just happening. Taoism calls this the action of non-action, which sounds like a paradox until you watch a river move around rocks. It doesn't think about the path, it becomes the path. Ethan started recognizing this quality in moments scattered throughout his day. Cooking dinner without planning each step, responding to emails without drafting them mentally first, moving through his studio like water finding its level. Natural, unhurried, complete. The Mushin technique had cracked something open. The illusion that he was separate from his experience, observing it from behind glass. Now there was just experience, no observer, no observed. Just the unified field of now, expressing itself through hands and breath, and choices that arose without an author claiming credit. But here's what nobody tells you about touching this state. It doesn't erase the ego permanently. It just shows you it was never in control to begin with. Ethan still had moments of doubt, still caught himself performing, still felt the pull of validation and fear. The difference was he could see it happening, the actor and the stage both visible at once. And in that seeing, there was space, not to fix anything, not to become enlightened, just to notice. Oh, there's the self that tries again. Hello, I see you. You're not real, but you're persistent. And then, almost effortlessly, attention would drop back into breath, back into body, back into the work itself. Action without author, presence without proof. And somewhere in that quiet dissolving, a truth he'd been circling his entire life finally landed. You were never the one doing it. You were always just the space where it happened. The paradox arrived like a whisper Ethan almost missed. The less he tried, the more he accomplished. Not in the motivational poster sense, but in the raw physics of how energy moves when you stop forcing it. He'd spent years pushing, deadlines, concepts, his own limitations, believing that achievement required relentless effort. But sitting in his studio one afternoon, watching a design emerge without strain, he realized something unsettling. His best work had never come from trying harder. It came from getting out of the way. Wu Wei doesn't mean laziness or passivity. It means doing without forcing, allowing without giving up, harmony between control and surrender. The river doesn't fight gravity, it uses it. And somewhere in that image, Ethan saw his entire approach to life reflected back at him, exhausted and unnecessary. There's a line in the Tao Te Ching that haunted him once he understood it. The master does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone. How could that be possible? How could non-action achieve anything? The Western mind recoils at this idea because we've built entire economies on the myth that more effort equals more result. But psychology of pain reveals a different truth. Most suffering comes not from what we do, but from how we do it, with resistance, with force, with the gnawing belief that we must muscle reality into shape. Ethan started experimenting. He'd approach a project without a plan, just a breath and a starting point. He'd let conversations unfold without steering them. He'd allow his day to have gaps instead of filling every moment with productivity. And something strange happened. Things got done. Better, faster, with less residue. This is where doing becomes the natural flow of self, not a performance extracted through willpower. Ethan noticed his energy changed. Before, he'd finish a project depleted, wrung out even when it went well. Now he'd close his laptop, feeling neutral, not high, not drained, just complete. Because when doing becomes natural flow, there's no separation between you and the task, no friction burning through your nervous system. You're not doing the work, you're the work happening through form. Spiritual transformation isn't about transcending the mundane, it's about recognizing that washing dishes, writing code, having a difficult conversation, all of it can be Wu Wei when you stop treating life like a problem to solve and start treating it like a current to ride. The mind hates this teaching because it makes the ego obsolete. If action arises naturally, without force, without a central me directing everything, then what's the ego's job? Where does it belong? Ethan felt this resistance viscerally. Part of him wanted to reclaim control, to prove he was the architect of his own success. But another part, quieter, older, recognized the relief in letting go. Non-attachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring without clinging to outcomes. He'd send work to clients and genuinely not know how he'd feel if they rejected it. Not because he was detached from his craft, but because he was no longer attached to being the one who needed validation from it. The work existed. He'd done it. What happened next wasn't his to control anyway. Meditation and suffering taught him this. You can't force peace the way you force productivity, and the moment you stop trying, peace is already there. Wu Wei is the practice of trusting that life knows how to unfold without constant interference, that your body knows how to breathe, that solutions arrive when you stop strangling them with analysis. Ethan started living with lighter hands. Not careless, not reckless, just open. He'd walk into his studio each morning without an agenda and see what wanted to emerge. Sometimes it was brilliant, sometimes it was garbage. Both were fine because neither defined him. When doing becomes the natural flow of self, you stop measuring your worth by what you produce. You start recognizing yourself as the space where things happen. Not the author, not the audience, just the quiet, breathing, ever-present field. And in that recognition, a question dissolved that had tormented him for years. What if you've already achieved everything you need to, just by being here? There's a state the ancient practitioners spoke of that has no equivalent in modern language, a fullness so complete it feels like nothing at all. Ethan stumbled into it on a random Wednesday, sitting in his studio with no deadline, no project, no purpose beyond existing in the chair. He wasn't meditating formally, wasn't practicing anything, just there. And in that there-ness, something shifted, not dramatically, not with fireworks or insight, just a quiet recognition that nothing was missing and nothing was excess. The state where nothing is missing and nothing is excess, not as philosophy, but as lived sensation. His chest felt open, his mind silent, his body present without effort. He'd been chasing this feeling his entire life through achievement, validation, success, and it had been waiting here all along, in the one place he'd never thought to look, nowhere at all. Buddhism calls this the empty circle, not void as in absence, but void as in space itself, the container that holds everything without being anything. Ethan realized he'd spent years trying to fill himself with skill, recognition, proof of worth, when the real work was emptying, letting go of the need to be someone impressive, releasing the story that he was broken and needed fixing, dissolving the performer who exhausted himself, maintaining an image nobody had actually asked for, silence as the supreme form of attention, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of completion. When there's nothing left to prove, attention stops fragmenting into past and future. It rests here, now, in the only moment that's ever actually existed. This is where spiritual transformation stops being a journey towards something and becomes a recognition of what's already present. Ethan had read about enlightenment, listened to teachers describe awakening, studied concepts like samsara and nirvana, and all of it had sounded distant, mystical, reserved for monks and masters. But sitting there, utterly ordinary, utterly empty, he understood. Nirvana isn't a destination you reach after years of suffering. It's what remains when you stop running from what is. The freedom to act without thinking about oneself, not because you've transcended the self, but because you've seen through it. The self that tries, that performs, that needs validation. It was never solid to begin with, just a collection of habits, fears, and stories given a name and treated like a king. Inner stillness isn't the absence of movement. It's the presence of space around movement. Ethan's life didn't slow down after touching this state. He still had deadlines, still dealt with difficult clients, still experienced doubt. But now there was room around it. The thoughts came, and there was space. The emotions rose, and there was space. The urge to perform appeared, and there was space to see it without becoming it. Impermanence became obvious not as concept but as direct experience, everything arising, everything passing, nothing worth clinging to because nothing stayed long enough to hold. And in that constant flux, the only stable point wasn't something he achieved. It was something he'd always been, awareness itself. Not Ethan the designer, not Ethan the performer, just awareness, watching Ethan happen. The empty circle doesn't promise happiness or success or even peace in the way we usually imagine it. What it offers is simpler and somehow more profound. Presence beyond proof. The recognition that you don't need to earn your existence through achievement. You don't need to validate your worth through others' eyes. You don't need to become someone better because there's no one there to improve. Just consciousness temporarily wearing a name, moving through form, experiencing itself through the specific angle of this life. Ethan sat in his studio, surrounded by years of work that once defined him, and felt nothing. Not depression, not detachment, just the quiet fullness of being here, now, complete exactly as things are. And for the first time since he could remember, there was no voice asking what comes next. No plan forming, no narrative constructing itself. just breath, just presence, just the wordless answer to every question he'd ever asked. You were always already here. You were always already enough, and nothing you did or didn't do ever changed that. So here's the question that matters now. Will you keep fighting for focus, or will you finally surrender into it? Ethan's story isn't unique, it's universal. We've all been the one trying too hard, performing too much, carrying weight that was never ours to hold. The mind that tries to control the moment, the noise of thought masquerading as clarity, the ego demanding proof through results. All of it, just resistance dressed in effort's clothing. Mushin doesn't ask you to become something new. It asks you to stop pretending you were ever separate from the flow to begin with. The empty circle isn't out there waiting for you to find it. It's here. It's been here. You've just been too busy searching to notice. Absolute focus arises when the mind dissolves into rhythm, not through force, but through the quiet, relentless practice of returning to breath, to body, to now. Shadow work, spiritual transformation, enlightenment through pain. These aren't distant mountains you climb. They're the ground you're already standing on, once you stop running from what is. You've carried the performer long enough. You've exhausted yourself trying to prove you belong in your own life. And maybe, just maybe, that exhaustion is the teacher you've been waiting for. Because Wu Wei, non-attachment, inner stillness, they don't ask for more effort. They ask for less. They ask you to trust what the body already knows, what the breath has always whispered, what presence keeps offering every single moment you stop demanding it look different. Do you still fear the silence? Or have you learned to breathe inside it? Can you create without needing applause? Can you exist without needing proof? Can you be here and fully, messily, imperfectly here, without the voice that says, it's not enough? If something in this video spoke to the part of you that's tired of performing, that's ready to stop fighting, that wants to remember what presence actually feels like, then don't stop here. Watch. The discipline that destroys you is the same one that sets you free next. It's the continuation of this path, the deepening of what you've just touched. Because the mind that discovered Mushin once needs to understand what happens when discipline stops being a weapon and becomes a doorway. Subscribe, and let's continue walking this path together. Not toward perfection, not toward proof, just toward the quiet, breathing truth of what you've always been. Continue walking. The next lesson awaits.